My name is Rachel and Whitmore, and I'm 32 years old. If you had told me a year ago that my own sister would slap me across the face in front of our parents, and that they'd do nothing to stop it, I would have laughed in disbelief. But disbelief ended the night of Thanksgiving. It was supposed to be just another family dinner, one of those traditions you go through because that's what families do, not because they're perfect. The table was crowded with turkey, cranberry sauce, mom's lumpy mashed potatoes, and that fake cheer people put on like a sweater that doesn't fit right. I never expected my sister to snap the way she did. One moment, I was sitting quietly, trying to ignore the way she kept glaring at me from across the table. The next, she slammed her wine glass down so hard it rattled the silverware. "You think you can just come in here, smiling like you belong?" she spat. Everyone froze. The heat in her voice made the room shrink. Before I could even ask what she meant, she stood, stormed around the table, and slapped me. Hard. The sting burned my cheek as I stumbled back in my chair, shocked. Then she shoved me so roughly I almost hit the floor. Her voice cracked like a whip. "Get out of my house." And here's the part that cut deeper than her hand ever could. My parents just sat there. Mom, fork paused midair. Dad, sipping his whiskey, eyes blank. Neither moved. Neither said a word. I stumbled out the front door, my face burning, my chest tight, holding back tears that begged for release. I stood in the yard, bruised not just in body, but in soul. That night, silence was my only companion. Before I continue, make sure you subscribe and stay with me till the end, because this story, it doesn't just stop at betrayal. It gets darker, and the twist that comes later will leave you breathless. Walking into the cold night, I thought about how we got here, me and my sister, Hannah. Two girls raised under the same roof, yet treated like strangers. Hannah was 3 years older, blonde like Mom, with the kind of easy charm that made teachers adore her and boys trip over themselves to date her. I was the quieter one, dark-haired like Dad, bookish, awkward, never quite enough. At least, not enough for my parents. I still remember being 10 years old, watching from the porch steps while Hannah unwrapped a shiny new bicycle for her birthday, pink with ribbons on the handles. I clapped for her, smiling, even though my chest ached. Because when it was my birthday 2 months later, I got socks. Mom said it was practical. Dad said Hannah needed more because she had potential. That word, potential, was always reserved for her, never for me. Still, I tried. I cooked dinner when Mom worked late. I did the laundry when Dad barked orders. I even helped Hannah with her college applications, proofreading essays while she laughed with her friends in the other room. But no matter what I gave, it was never enough. And yet, I still came back every holiday. I still hoped that maybe, just maybe, this year they'd notice me. That maybe they'd see I was worth keeping around. Thanksgiving proved me wrong. Later that night, I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. My phone buzzed, a message from Hannah. My heart leapt, foolishly hoping it was an apology. But no. It read, "Stay gone. You've always ruined everything." I dropped the phone like it had burned me. Ruined everything? I thought. What had I ruined? Her dinner? Her perfect little life? I sobbed until my throat hurt, until I was empty. Then, I drove home to my tiny apartment, where no one waited for me. The week that followed was hollow. Work felt mechanical. I typed reports, smiled at colleagues, nodded when necessary. But inside, I was replaying that moment over and over. The slap, the shove, the silence of my parents' cold faces. Until 1 week later, when the knock on their door changed everything. A package. Small. Brown. Harmless looking. But inside was something that would make my mother's frantic voice leave 30 missed calls on my phone. I let it ring. I let it buzz. And when I finally picked up, all I said was 3 words that made her scream louder. "Get out. Now." But I'm getting ahead of myself. Because before I tell you what was in that package, the secret that shattered their picture-perfect world, you need to know what drove me to send it. You need to know the years of betrayal buried beneath smiles and Sunday dinners. You need to know why my sister's slap wasn't the start. It was the finale to a lifetime of being unseen, unheard, unwanted. And maybe then you'll understand why I finally decided to stop begging for a seat at their table and start pulling the tablecloth out from under them. When I was a little girl, I believed families were supposed to be safe havens, warm kitchens, gentle laughter, hugs when you fell down. I learned very early that in the Whitmore household, safety was selective. My sister, Hannah, had a spotlight that followed her everywhere. It wasn't her fault at first, it was my parents who placed it there. Mom brushed her golden hair every morning before school, telling her she looked like a princess. Dad bragged about her grades, her piano recitals, her soccer games. And me? I was the quiet one. The afterthought. The one whose drawings got pinned to the fridge only if there was leftover space. I used to trace the dust on the family photo frames in our living room. Almost every one featured Hannah front and center, her smile wide and confident. I was always on the edge, sometimes half cut out of the frame like I wasn't meant to be there at all. By high school, the favoritism had grown sharper. I remember the night I brought home a report card with straight A's. I was trembling with pride, thinking, finally, they'll notice me. Dad skimmed the paper and shrugged. Well, it's easier for you, he said, eyes already back on the TV. You don't have a social life to distract you. 2 weeks later, Hannah brought home a B+ in biology, and Mom baked a cake to celebrate how hard she was trying. That was the rhythm of my life. My best was invisible, her mediocrity was gold-plated. But the real fracture didn't come until our 20s. After college, I stayed in the city, working as an assistant at a small marketing firm. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid rent, and I was proud to be independent. Hannah, meanwhile, announced at one Christmas dinner that she was moving back home, just until she figured things out. She never figured anything out. She lived rent-free in the same house I'd once scrubbed floors in. Dad gave her money for a new car. Mom cooked her favorite meals every night. And when I visited, I could feel the resentment radiating from her. Like my small achievements, rent paid on time, a job with health benefits, were insults to her failures. She masked it with snide jokes. Oh look, Rachel's here. Miss Responsible with her spreadsheets. Everyone laughed, even Mom. I laughed too, but inside it stung. Fast forward to Thanksgiving night. The slap, the shove, the cold silence. It wasn't an explosion out of nowhere. It was a pressure cooker that had been hissing for years. What made her snap, though? That was the question that haunted me the week after. Why, after everything, did Hannah decide that night to humiliate me so viciously? The answer didn't come from her. It came from an old memory I'd buried, one that began clawing its way back the night I sealed that package. I was 19, home for summer break. One evening, I walked into the kitchen and found Hannah whispering to Mom. They stopped abruptly when they saw me. Go to your room, Rachel, Mom said quickly, her voice sharp. I should have obeyed, but I lingered by the doorway, just long enough to catch Hannah's words. She doesn't need to know. If she finds out, it'll ruin everything. Mom nodded, glancing at me with eyes colder than winter. At the time, I convinced myself it was about something trivial. Maybe a surprise, maybe gossip I wasn't supposed to hear. I pushed it away. But the look in Mom's eyes, that flicker of fear, stayed with me. Years later, sitting alone in my apartment after Thanksgiving, I realized something. My parents' silence while Hannah attacked me wasn't just indifference. It was protection.
Not of me.
Of her. Like always. The more I thought about it, the more I remembered. Little hints. Slips of the tongue. A document left on the dining table once, half covered by the newspaper. My father quickly snatched it up when I asked what it was. And then there was Hannah herself. She used to sneer at me when we fought. You don't know the half of it, Rachel. You never will. Back then, I thought she was just being cruel. But what if she meant it literally? What if there was a truth buried deep in our family that I wasn't meant to know? That thought kept me awake for nights. Until one Saturday morning, I decided I was done being in the dark. I drove to my parents' house when I knew they'd be out grocery shopping. My hands shook as I used the spare key still hidden under the ceramic frog by the porch. The air inside smelled the same, lemon cleaner and old books, but walking through those rooms felt like entering enemy territory. I went straight to the study. Dad's desk was locked. Always had been. But Hannah wasn't as careful as he was. In her old room, stuffed inside a shoebox under her bed, I found a bundle of papers. Bank statements, letters, and one manila folder labeled in Mom's handwriting, R. Do not discard. My chest tightened as I opened it. Inside was a birth certificate. Mine. Only it wasn't. The name printed there wasn't Rachel and Whitmore. It was something else. A name I didn't recognize. And the parents listed weren't Mom and Dad. I staggered back, clutching the paper as though it might burst into flames. My vision blurred. My breath came in shallow gasps. No, this had to be a mistake. But it wasn't. Every cell in my body knew it. The reason my parents never loved me the same way they loved Hannah. The reason I always felt like an intruder in my own family. The reason Hannah despised me with such venom. I wasn't who I thought I was. And my parents knew it all along. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat at my kitchen table, the folder spread out in front of me, whispering to myself. They lied. They lied to me for 32 years. But even as my heart cracked open, a darker thought crept in. If they lied about this, what else were they hiding? I knew what I had to do. I gathered every document, every shred of evidence, sealed them in a plain brown package, and mailed it to their doorstep. Let them open it. Let them choke on the truth they buried. And when the phone rang days later, Mom's frantic voice leaving 30 desperate messages, I ignored them all. Until finally I answered. Her voice was ragged, broken. Rachel, please. It was all a mistake. We can explain. I pressed the phone to my ear, my hands steady for the first time in weeks. Get out. Now. After the package arrived at their doorstep, silence wrapped around me like a shield. For the first time in my life, I felt a flicker of power. But power is never safe in families like mine. The 30 missed calls from Mom were just the beginning. Texts followed, desperate, frantic, disjointed. Rachel, please come home. We need to talk. You don't understand the full story. We can fix this. Don't throw away your family. Every word dripped with the same poison I'd swallowed my whole life. Guilt, manipulation, control. And then came the final text that made my blood run cold. From Hannah. If you don't shut your mouth, you'll regret it. I tried to pretend her threats didn't shake me. I went to work, plastered on a smile, answered emails like nothing was wrong. But every time my phone buzzed, I flinched. Every time a shadow passed my window, my stomach knotted. Because I knew my sister, and when Hannah Whitmore was cornered, she didn't just lash out. She destroyed. The first attack was subtle. One morning, I walked into the office and found my manager waiting by my desk, holding a printed email. Rachel, he said, his voice clipped, I need to talk to you about this. The email was allegedly from me, sent at midnight to a client. It was full of insults, profanity, even a racial slur I would never say. This isn't mine. I protested, my voice trembling. I didn't write this. But the damage was done. The client had already cut ties with us, costing the company money. My manager said I could keep my job for now, but my reputation was tarnished. I knew who was behind it. Hannah had hacked me, or worse, gotten one of her tech-savvy friends to do it. And she wasn't stopping there. 2 nights later, I returned to my apartment to find the door slightly ajar. My heart hammered. I pushed it open, inch by inch. Inside, the living room was wrecked. Couch cushions slashed. Papers scattered across the floor. My laptop gone. And on the wall, written in black marker, were 3 chilling words. Stay in line. I called the police, but they filed a report with tired eyes and empty promises. No fingerprints. No forced entry. Nothing they could do. When I told them I suspected my sister, they exchanged a glance that said family drama and closed their notepads. I was alone. Again. That night, I sat on the kitchen floor, clutching my knees, whispering to myself like a prayer. Don't let her win. Don't let her win. But the truth was, Hannah had always won. The next morning, Mom showed up at my apartment. Her eyes were red, her hands trembling as she reached for me. "Rachel, honey, please. You have to stop this. You don't understand how much is at stake." I pulled back. "What's at stake, Mom? My life? My sanity? Or is it just Hannah's perfect little reputation?" She flinched, her mouth opening and closing like she wanted to confess, but then she stopped. She straightened her shoulders, her voice sharp. "You're making a mess where there doesn't need to be one." And just like that, she turned and walked out, slamming the door behind her. Her reaction told me everything. The secret wasn't just about me. It was about all of them. 2 days later, I found out what she'd meant by at stake. At work, whispers followed me down the hall. My boss called me in. On his desk lay printed screenshots, posts from a fake Facebook account with my picture, my name. Posts accusing the company of corruption, calling out coworkers by name, spreading lies. "Rachel," my boss said heavily, "we can't have this. You're suspended until further notice." My chest caved in. My livelihood gone. And I knew exactly whose fingerprints were all over it. Hannah's. That evening, I confronted her. I drove to my parents' house, my hands shaking on the steering wheel, fury roaring in my veins. She opened the door with a smirk. "Well, look who finally grew a spine. Why are you doing this?" I demanded. "What did I ever do to you?" Her laughter was sharp, cruel. "You still don't get it, do you? You were never supposed to be here, Rachel. You're not one of us. You never were." Her words sliced deeper than her slap ever could. "Then tell me the truth," I shouted, tears stinging my eyes. "If I'm not one of you, then who am I?" She leaned in close, her breath hot against my ear. "You'll find out soon enough. But when you do, it'll destroy you." Then she shoved me back and slammed the door in my face. I drove home in a daze, her words echoing. "You were never supposed to be here." What did that mean? The birth certificate I found had already cracked my world open. But Hannah's taunt suggested there was even more beneath the rubble. Something darker. And for the first time in my life, I felt real fear. Not of losing my family, they were already gone. Not of losing my job that could be rebuilt. But fear of the truth itself. What if finding out who I really was meant losing everything I thought I had left? That night, I sat at my desk, staring at the scattered documents from the manila folder. Birth records. Hospital notes. A name that wasn't mine. And tucked between them, one paper I hadn't noticed before. A court record. My hands trembled as I read it. It wasn't just adoption. It wasn't just a secret. It was something else. Something worse. The words swam before my eyes, but one line burned itself into my memory. Custody granted following removal from biological mother due to... I froze. Due to what? The page ended there, cut off, as though the rest had been deliberately removed. My breath quickened. My vision blurred. I scrambled for my phone, ready to dig deeper, to search, to demand answers, when it buzzed in my hand. A new message. From an unknown number. It said, "Stop digging, Rachel. Or next time, it won't just be your apartment we wreck." I didn't sleep that night. How could I? The thread on my phone glowed in my mind like a warning flare. "Stop digging, Rachel." But I couldn't stop. Not now. Not when I was so close to the truth that had been poisoning my life since the day I was born. So I went back to the manila folder. Back to the jagged hole where that court record had been cut off. Someone didn't want me to see what was missing, which meant it was the most important part. The next morning, I drove to the county courthouse. My heart pounded as I requested old records, my voice shaking but firm. The clerk disappeared into the archives, and when she returned, she set a thin folder in front of me. "This is all we have," she said. Inside was the missing page. My eyes devoured the words. Custody granted to the Whitmore family following removal from biological mother due to charges of neglect and abuse. The world tilted. My stomach lurched. Neglect. Abuse. I wasn't just adopted. I was rescued. But the document didn't stop there. It listed my biological mother's name. A name I didn't recognize. And beneath it, Hannah's name. Because she wasn't just my sister. She was my cousin. I staggered out of the courthouse, the sun blinding, my lungs gasping for air. Everything clicked into place like broken glass cutting into skin. Hannah had known all along. My parents had lied not just to protect me, but to protect her. To protect the family name. To bury the shame of what really happened. And Hannah? She hated me because my existence was a mirror she couldn't bear to look into. She wasn't the chosen one. She was the secret keeper. That evening, I marched up to the Whitmore house one last time. My pulse thundered, but my resolve was steel. They were all there, Mom, Dad, Hannah, sitting in the living room like they'd been waiting for me. Dad's jaw tightened. Mom's eyes brimmed with tears. Hannah smirked, that same cruel smirk she wore the night she slapped me. So, I said, my voice low but steady, are you going to keep lying, or are you finally going to tell me the truth? No one answered. So I held up the court record. I know I'm not your daughter. I know Hannah's not my sister. I know everything. Mom broke first. She collapsed into sobs. We just wanted to protect you, Rachel. You were so little. You'd been hurt, and we wanted you to feel safe. We thought, if you believed you were ours, maybe you'd never feel like you were unwanted again. I laughed, bitter and sharp. Unwanted? Do you have any idea how unwanted you made me feel? 32 years of being invisible, 32 years of favoritism, of silence while I pointed at Hannah, tore me apart.
You didn't protect me.
You destroyed me. Dad's voice was cold, clipped. You should be grateful, Rachel. Without us, you'd have nothing. You'd be nothing. That was it. The final knife. I turned to Hannah.
And you?
You've spent your whole life making sure I knew I didn't belong.
Why?
Because you're terrified people will find out the truth? That I'm the living reminder of your mother's sins? Her smirk faltered. For the first time, I saw fear flash in her eyes. You think you're better than me? She spat. You're trash, Rachel. That's all you've ever been. Trash we picked up off the street. My hand shook as I raised the folder higher. No, Hannah. I'm not trash. I'm proof. Proof of everything you've been hiding. And if you ever come near me again, if you ever try to ruin me again, I will make sure the whole world sees this. Her face twisted. She lunged at me, but this time I didn't stumble back. I stood my ground. Touch me, I hissed, and I'll burn this whole house of lies to the ground. The room went silent. For once, I wasn't the quiet one. For once, they were. I walked out that night and never looked back. The weeks that followed were messy. Job interviews, therapy sessions, nights of crying until my chest ached. But slowly, piece by piece, I rebuilt. I found a new apartment in a different neighborhood, one with sunlight streaming through the windows and neighbors who waved good morning. I found a new job where my boss valued me, where no one knew the Whitmore name. And most importantly, I found myself. Not the Rachel they molded out of shame and silence, but the Rachel who survived it all. Mom kept calling for a while. 30 missed calls turned into 50. Her voicemails swung between sobs and anger. Please, Rachel, we love you. You're being cruel. You'll regret this. But I never picked up. One night, I sat on my balcony, phone in hand, watching the sunset paint the sky gold. I thought about Hannah's slap, about my parents' silence, about the words that had once defined me. Quiet, unwanted, nothing. And then I thought about the words that define me now. Survivor, truth teller, free. I deleted every number that tied me to them. I blocked every message, every email. For the first time in my life, I chose myself. And that's when I realized the package I sent to them wasn't revenge. It was a mirror, forcing them to finally look at themselves, stripped of lies, stripped of masks. They wanted me gone. But in the end, I was the one who told them to leave. 3 words that set me free. Get out.
Now.
Epilogue/life lesson for YouTube audience. Family isn't just blood. Sometimes, blood is the heaviest chain you'll ever carry. And sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is put it down and walk away. I learned that healing isn't about getting the love you never received. It's about giving it to yourself. And now I want to ask you, backhanded ex-pointing right, have you ever experienced betrayal from the very people who are supposed to protect you? How did you find the strength to walk away? Share your story in the comments. I'll be reading. When I walked out of the Whitmore house that night, folder clutched to my chest, I thought it was the end. The truth was out. The masks were off. I had finally broken free. But I underestimated them. Families like mine don't just release their grip, they tighten it until you can't breathe. At first, it came in whispers. Neighbors I'd grown up around stopped making eye contact at the grocery store. Women at church whispered behind their hymn books when I passed. Then it spread wider. At my new job, just 3 weeks in, my manager called me into his office, his face carefully neutral. "Rachel, I need to ask, did you really threaten your sister's life?" I blinked. "What?" He slid his phone across the desk. A Facebook post filled the screen. A long rant, allegedly written by me. "If Hannah ever lays a hand on me again, I swear I'll kill her. She won't see it coming." My stomach dropped. That's not me. I didn't write this. But my manager didn't look convinced. He warned me that one more incident could cost me my job. I left his office trembling. Hannah's game was clear. If she couldn't silence me, she'd discredit me. Days later, my bank account froze. I logged in to find a zero balance, overdraft charges piling up. When I called the bank, they said my account had been flagged after suspicious transfers to offshore accounts. I hadn't made any transfers, but someone had, using my name. When I explained, the bank clerk's voice was clipped. "Ms. Whitmore, this isn't the first time we've seen something like this. If you're in financial trouble, there are better ways than fraud." I hung up, my hands shaking. They didn't believe me. No one did. For the first time, I considered giving up. Just packing a bag, leaving town, disappearing. But then, something shifted. One night, sitting on my couch with an eviction notice crumpled in my fist, I thought, this is what they want. They want me erased. And I realized I wasn't going to let them win. So I called a therapist. Her name was Dr. Carter, a calm woman with silver hair and eyes that seemed to see through every lie I'd been told. In our first session, I told her everything: Thanksgiving, the slap, the documents, the package, the threats. My voice cracked, broke, rebuilt itself. She listened quietly. Then she said something that stunned me. "Rachel, you've been trying to win their love your whole life. But what if the victory isn't winning them over? What if the victory is walking away and still thriving?" Her words planted a seed. A small one, but enough to keep me from running. For weeks, I tried to live quietly. Therapy sessions, work, rebuilding what Hannah had torn down. I avoided the Whitmores, ignored their calls, blocked their emails. But Hannah doesn't handle silence well. She thrives on conflict, on spectacle. And when I denied her that, she escalated. It was a Friday evening when she showed up at my new job. I was in the lobby, gathering my things, when the glass doors swung open and she walked in, heels clicking, eyes blazing. "Rachel," she shouted, her voice echoing across the room. Heads turned. Coworkers froze mid-step. I stiffened. "You need to leave." But she was already striding toward me, waving papers in her hand. "Tell them the truth," she yelled. "Tell them you're a liar. Tell them you're a fraud who's been blackmailing our parents for years." Gasps rippled through the room. My boss stepped forward, trying to intervene, but Hannah shoved past him, shoving the papers in my face. They were fake bank records. Ones that proved I'd been extorting money from Mom and Dad. My coworkers stared at me with wide, uncertain eyes. And in that moment, I felt myself unraveling. Not from her accusations, but from the realization of just how far she would go to destroy me. Security finally dragged her out, but the damage was done. Rumors spread like wildfire. By Monday, HR asked me to take a leave of absence until the situation clears. I sat in my car afterward, gripping the steering wheel, rage simmering beneath my skin. Hannah wasn't just fighting to silence me. She was fighting to erase me from existence.
But why?
Why risk so much? Why pour so much venom into me? Unless there was more she was terrified I'd find. That night, I pulled out the documents again. The birth certificate, the custody file, my biological mother's name. I typed it into every database I could access, scrolling through articles, court records, obituaries. Hours passed. My eyes blurred. And then, I found her. Not dead. Not in prison. Alive. Living in a small town 2 states over. My heart raced. For 32 years, I'd been fed lies about her. That she'd been abusive, neglectful, unfit to be a mother. But if she was still alive, maybe I could finally hear her side. Maybe the truth wasn't what the Whitmores wanted me to believe. The next morning, I packed a bag. Just a few clothes, the documents, and enough courage to carry me down the highway. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. Not Mom. Not Dad. Not Hannah. But as I drove out of the city, a black SUV pulled into my lane behind me. Its tinted windows loomed in my rearview mirror. Too close, too steady. My chest tightened. I pressed harder on the gas. The SUV matched me, mile for mile. That's when I knew. Hannah wasn't done with me yet. The SUV followed me for nearly 30 miles. Every time I switched lanes, it switched too. Every time I slowed, it slowed. When I finally pulled off into a gas station, it circled the lot once, then disappeared into the night. But I knew it wasn't gone. I sat in my car, hands gripping the wheel, chest heaving. A part of me wanted to turn back, crawl into bed, and pretend none of this was happening. But then I remembered Hannah's face in that office lobby, the venom in her eyes. If she was willing to stalk me down a highway, then whatever truth I was chasing was big enough to scare her. And that meant I couldn't stop now. The small town where my mother lived was nothing like the city. The streets were quiet, lined with maple trees just starting to turn orange in the crisp autumn air. Houses here weren't polished like the Whitmores' estate. Paint peeled. Lawns grew wild. But it felt real. Her house sat at the end of a gravel road, a small blue cottage with wind chimes on the porch. My heart hammered as I parked. I hadn't seen her face since I was a baby. But the second the door opened, I knew. Her eyes, green, sharp, unyielding, were my eyes. "Rachel," she whispered, her hand flying to her mouth. I nodded, my throat too tight for words. And just like that, 32 years of lies began to unravel. Inside, the cottage smelled of lavender and old books. My mother, Margaret, sat across from me at the kitchen table, her hands trembling as she poured tea. "I thought they'd keep you from me forever," she said softly. But I never stopped hoping. I leaned forward. They told me you were abusive. That you hurt me. That's why they got custody." Her face crumpled. "Rachel, no. That's what they wanted people to believe. The truth is, they stole you from me." My breath caught. "Stole me?" She nodded, tears glistening. "I was young, poor, a single mother. They offered to help, said you'd have better opportunities with them. But when I changed my mind, when I tried to get you back, they painted me as unstable. They had money, influence, lawyers. I had nothing. They won." Her words struck like a hammer. All those years I'd believed I was unwanted, unloved, when in truth, I'd been taken. I pressed my hands to my face, fighting tears. And then another thought cut through. If I knew this now, Hannah must know too. And that's why she was fighting so hard to silence me. Over the next 2 days, Margaret filled in the blanks. She showed me old court filings, letters she'd written that were returned unopened, even a faded photo of herself holding me as a baby. Each piece was another nail in the coffin of the Whitmore story. But even as hope bloomed, fear shadowed it. Because Hannah wasn't backing down. On the 3rd night, as I stepped outside to breathe the cool air, I spotted headlights again at the end of the gravel road. The same SUV, parked just far enough to look casual, but close enough that I knew they were watching. I hurried back inside, heart pounding. "Mom," I said, locking the door. "I don't think they'll let this go." She nodded grimly. The Whitmores have always believed they can rewrite history, but they can't erase the truth forever. The next morning, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Hannah's voice crackled through the line, cold and sharp. "So you found her." I froze. "Leave me alone, Hannah." Her laugh was bitter. "You think she's some saint? You don't know half of it. Why do you think our parents kept you? Why do you think they fought so hard?" Her words sank like ice into my chest. "What are you talking about?" "Ask her," Hannah sneered. "Ask her why she really lost you. Or better yet, I'll tell you myself before she feeds you another sob story." The line went dead. I stared at the phone, dread creeping into my bones. What if Hannah wasn't lying? That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat at the table with Margaret, staring at her across the candlelight. "Tell me the truth," I whispered. "All of it. Don't leave anything out." She sighed heavily, her shoulders slumping. "Rachel, there's something I didn't tell you. Not because I wanted to lie, but because I didn't want to lose you again." My chest tightened. "What is it?" She swallowed hard. "When you were a baby, there was an accident. You fell. I should have been watching closer, but I was exhausted, overwhelmed. You were fine, thank God, but when I took you to the hospital, they thought I'd hurt you. They filed a report. The Whitmores used it in court to paint me as dangerous." I stared at her, my mind spinning. So it was true. At least partly. Tears filled her eyes. "Rachel, I never abused you. But yes, I made mistakes. Ones they twisted into something monstrous. And they never let me live it down." My hands shook as I pushed back from the table. Part of me wanted to believe her completely. Another part remembered Hannah's voice. "You don't know half of it." I went to bed that night torn in two, caught between the mother who claimed she was robbed of me and the family who weaponized her mistakes. And I knew, sooner or later, I'd have to choose what to believe. The choice came faster than I expected. The following afternoon, Margaret's mailbox clanged shut. She walked in holding a thick envelope, her face pale. "It's from them," she whispered. I snatched it, ripping it open. Inside were photos, grainy, black and white hospital reports, with words scrawled across the top in Hannah's handwriting. "See the truth before it kills you." My stomach churned. Attached was a single photo of me as a baby, bruised along my arm, eyes wide with confusion. Margaret's face crumpled as she saw it. "Rachel, I swear I never laid a hand on you. That bruise came from the fall. But they'll never stop using it." I dropped the papers onto the table, my hands trembling. For the first time, I realized this wasn't just about family. It was about power, about control, about who got to decide the story of my life. And if I didn't take that power back, Hannah was going to write my ending for me. That night, as the wind howled outside the cottage, I sat awake, staring at the stack of documents spread across the floor. Hannah thought she could bury me with half-truths and old wounds. But what she didn't understand was this. Every secret she tried to use against me only made me stronger. I wasn't the scared little girl at Thanksgiving anymore. I was a woman who knew the truth, messy, complicated, painful, but mine. And I was done running. So when my phone buzzed again at midnight, with Hannah's name flashing across the screen, I didn't hesitate. I answered, my voice steady. "If you want a war, Hannah, you've got one." There was silence on the line. Then slowly she laughed. "Oh, Rachel," she said, her voice dripping with venom. "Be careful what you wish for. You have no idea what I've been saving for this moment." The call ended, and I knew our final confrontation was coming. The night before I planned to strike felt like the quiet before an explosion. I'd spent weeks gathering documents, recording phone conversations, copying old emails, and finding witnesses. People who remembered the Whitmores differently than the polished story they told at church and on lawn signs. I'd built a map of their lies, and now I had to lead others to the truth. My living room looked like a war room. Paper stacks, a thumb drive labeled evidence, a recorder, and a printed timeline that traced decades of manipulation. Margaret had driven 2 hours to be with me. She sat on the couch, her hands folded, looking tired but fierce. "We can do this," she said, voice soft. We don't need to destroy anyone. We just need to tell the truth. Telling the truth sounded easier than it was. Truth exposed means decisions made by strangers, by former friends, by employers, by the community that once bowed to the Whitmore name. But I knew nothing would change unless someone saw the receipts. The plan was simple and brutal. I would go public. Not with vengeance, but with facts, the court files, the letters Mom and Dad had hidden, the hospital reports with amended notes showing the fall that had been twisted into abuse, the emails proving Hannah's threats, and the fake posts she'd used to smear me. I would send everything to a local journalist I'd contacted, to legal aid groups, and to a private Facebook community for survivors of family coercion. I would stand in front of whoever would listen and tell my story. We rehearsed what I'd say. I practiced breathing into my diaphragm, lowering my voice so anger wouldn't become my only language. Margaret printed copies of every document I'd collected. We labeled them carefully: court record 1989, medical report 1990, emails 2018 to 2025. Every piece had a sticky note with context. I felt like an archaeologist cataloging bones. But these bones were my life. The morning I planned to release the files, I woke to a pounding on my door. My heart leapt, the SUV paranoia returned, and for a second I panicked. But when I opened it, it was not Hannah or her hired intimidation crew. It was my coworker, Jen, eyes rimmed in red, clutching a coffee. "You okay?" she asked, breathless. I read something last night. I had to come. You can't do this alone." I blinked. "What did you read?" She handed me her phone. A thread of messages from our office group chat scrolled across the screen. Colleagues debating whether my family's name meant I could no longer be trusted at work. Then, suddenly, others defending me, referencing the documents I'd quietly shared with a few close friends. She told me the journalist I'd emailed had called, asking to meet. A legal aid group had offered to look at my files. I hadn't realized my small, private leaks had already reached a few sympathetic ears. There was no time for doubt. The world was listening in small ways. I had to make it listen in a big one. We met with the journalist in a cramped cafe. He was mid-30s, a serious face, and he read with the detachment of someone who handles truth often, like a surgeon. When I slid the thumb drive across the table, I felt an odd calm. I watched his features as he skimmed documents. He asked precise, steady questions. "Can you verify this? Who else can corroborate? Are you prepared for the fallout?" I nodded to each.
Yes. No.
And yes. Publishing day arrived like a drumroll. The article dropped mid-morning, headlined with a sober, factual line. Local family's long-standing reputation challenged by new documents. Woman says she was taken as a child. The piece laid out the timeline, quoted court records, included Margaret's voice, and linked to redacted files for verification. It didn't scream revenge. It pointed to systemic failures, power, money, and how narratives get weaponized. The reaction was immediate and unpredictable. Some doors closed. A handful of my so-called friends said they needed distance, their messages thinly veiled as concern. The Whitmore circle, neighbors, PTA moms, the small business clique, began to unravel with whispers. But others reached out, survivors, strangers, and people who said, "Thank you for speaking up." A local support group offered to put me on their roster as a speaker. My boss called and asked to meet. He didn't fire me. Instead, he apologized for how the company had handled the rumors and promised to support me through the noise. Hannah's response was expected. She posted a blistering statement on a public page she'd used as her platform, a theatrical piece about family privacy, lies told for attention, and how I was weaponizing family pain for clicks. She added photos, cropped, selective, meant to paint me unstable. The pattern was familiar: attack the messenger. But what surprised me was the shift in other voices. People I respected started asking questions. The pastor who'd praised the Whitmores for years asked to meet in person. A neighbor who'd once invited Hannah for charity galas now returned my calls. The truth wasn't an instant redemption. It was a fracture that let light in. Where there was light, there was accountability. Still, Hannah wasn't done. 2 days after the piece ran, a woman emailed the journalist, anonymously at first, claiming to be a former nurse who'd only seen signs of neglect. The reporter checked, and the nurse turned out to have a history of being hired by wealthy clients for damage control. Patterns emerged. The Whitmores had quietly cultivated alliances. I felt the panic rising. This was exactly what Hannah would do: swamp the conversation with fake charges until the truth drowned. I called Dr. Carter and scheduled an emergency session. I couldn't sleep because every time I blinked, Hannah's words, "You have no idea what I've been saving," returned like a threat. Then a new voice entered, my father's old assistant, Miss Klein, who had left the Whitmore household years earlier and never fully fit into their picture-perfect team. She sent me a message. "Meet me at the library. I have something." When we met, she slid a thin envelope across the table. Inside were photos and notes, handwritten lines in my parents' ledger that showed payments to a legal firm, letters to county officials, and a contract for an adoption solicitor who'd worked for wealthy clients. Ms. Klein's hands trembled. "They were building a case," she whispered. "They wanted a child of their own. They found you, and then they fought like devils to keep you." Her words burned and soothed at once. The ledger showed transactions where money had influenced the system. This wasn't simply a family favor. This was a deliberate conquest. Armed with Ms. Klein's documents, the journalist wrote a follow-up. The piece painted a broader picture: influence, intimidation, and a small-town power structure that could be toppled by truth. The tide turned, but not without cost. An anonymous package arrived at my door 2 nights later. Inside, a single Polaroid of me as a toddler, face down, and a note: "We can make this go away." No name. No signature. Fear visited me again, but not like before. This time it arrived with an undercurrent. I had witnesses, records, and an increasing chorus of voices willing to stand with me. Margaret slept in my spare room those nights. Dr. Carter helped me build safety plans. Jen sat with me on the couch and scrolled through replies that ranged from vicious to compassionate. I found allies,